So, Connor, you had a piece in the Jacobin this week about Steve Bannon and his broad-based, I guess, program, which we saw some of it on evidence at least in terms of sort of broad platitudes from Donald Trump this week during his speech. It also was juxtaposed with former governor of Kentucky Beshear's response that was situated in a diner, and we can get to that in a moment. But just give us a sense of why you attribute Donald Trump's broad-based, I guess, economic program, if we can call it that, to Stephen Bannon, and then give us a sense of what Bannon's, I guess, ideology, how you would describe it.
Well, I think we can attribute what makes Trump different than other Republicans to Steve Bannon, because Steve Bannon is someone who superficially is not on board the kind of laissez-faire Paul Ryan mainstream GOP program. And Steve Bannon considers himself, he calls himself an economic nationalist. It's not that this is a more progressive economic viewpoint. It's just that it is different than the kind of Paul Ryan view. And I don't know if you saw, but a couple days ago it was announced that, the GOP really wants to go after Medicaid. And one of the lone voices in the Trump administration that's saying no is Steve Bannon, because Steve Bannon doesn't have that same Paul Ryan just hatred of all the welfare state. Steve Bannon understands that, unlike someone like Ryan or others, that Medicaid is something that's going to be important to a lot of the lower income people in the Rust Belt and other places that voted for Trump. So Bannon is kind of this counterweight to this kind of more standard neoliberal laissez-faire economic ideology. But like I said, it's not any kind of more progressive. It's not a more progressive kind of economics. I mean, when they talk about what the solution to the crisis is all about reshoring really low wage manufacturing jobs by competing with developing world wages. And, that to me does not sound anything close to any kind of progressive economic program.
So if we could describe and describe Paul Ryan's economic worldview as being neoliberal, and which for our purposes here will be market-based solutions. I mean, one of the reasons why he is why Medicare and Medicaid, and I would argue also Social Security, are such gleams in his eye in terms of cutting these things, is because ultimately it means less money being paid in terms of taxes, and creating more market opportunities for his his donors, or frankly, that's just the way his worldview works. How would you describe Bannon's? I mean, it's one thing to say it's not a progressive one, but he also doesn't have the same, I guess, jonesing to cut Medicaid, let's say. Right. I don't know if we know where he is in terms of Medicare and Social Security, but certainly Trump, over the course of the campaign, at the very least, expressed that this is a political non-starter. I mean, what is it? What is Steve Bannon's project? I mean, to me, it seems that Trump's project is whatever's going to maintain Trump's position is really sort of fundamentally his ideology. But what is Steve Bannon's?
Right. Well, Bannon is definitely a more unique and interesting person than the rest of the right. I think his project is, as he's been fairly clear about, is he really thinks that basically he's really critical of the kind of turn towards like finance and these kind of like these industries that don't employ many people. So he mistakenly believes that we're going to lower unemployment and bring back some golden era by bringing back these jobs, but by bringing them back by, I believe he's against minimum wage. They want to go after labor unions and bring right to work national. So I think his project is just this twisted idea that you can turn back the clock by, driving wages into the ground. So he's kind of playing on voters' nostalgia for a golden age that, is not all of it's true. Like this idea that back in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, everyone had a manufacturing job and it was going great. But, what Bannon wants to do is play on that nostalgia. But, how he wants to go about this, like I said, it's brutal. I mean, it basically involves smashing labor unions. It involves lowering employees' safety standards, obviously pay. It's nothing that it's something people should be afraid of.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, I mean, it's tough to get my arms around this on some level because we know that I think there's a sufficient support. Reporting at this point, and just based upon the speech this week that President Trump gave, that there is a desire to curtail not just undocumented immigration, but all immigration, and
right.
To leave America, we heard over and over again, for Americans. I think that's somewhat coded. We have, transcripts of Donald Trump back in 2012 saying, I think at CPAC, in fact, lamenting the fact that we don't get European and Canadian immigrants anymore. We get all our immigrants from other places. You don't have to, that's fairly straightforward in terms of the complaint there, that there's this sort of heritage quality. I mean, so is Bannon looking to return to a time of the robber barons, right? I mean, because he doesn't seem to have an issue, and certainly if we look upon what we can see of the Trump administration, never mind what I think is yet to be revealed about the way that the Trump administration is operating, that they certainly don't have an issue with picking winners and losers in a very explicit way, in a way that is, I think, even more intimately tied to who benefits in the White House. I mean, does that make sense on some level that we're talking about sort of a late 1800s, early 1900s type of vision of robber barons and in this country?
Yeah, I think that probably is close to what his vision is. And, it's important. I mean, he says that he explicitly said, we're going to get, he has some quote like, we're going to get shipyards all jacked up and we're going to bring back all this, we're going to rebuild America. And he goes, it's going to be as exciting as the 1930s. So he says the 1930s, but he's leaving out the things about the 1930s that made all these things possible, which was working class militancy, which was, the Communist Party running around and organizing workers. It was the Wagner Act passed by FDR's, the FDR era, which enabled tens of thousands of people basically overnight to join labor unions. So he's selling it as if it's a return to some, he says the 1930s, meaning the New Deal, but I think the robber baron era is a closer parallel. But you know what? Even giving him that, like the robber baron era was horrible. It was basically like war on working Americans. There was the Pinkertons and strike breaking. Basically the state largely went to war with the working class. But there was a rebuilding in that era. I mean, the infrastructure of cities was all going up in that time. But even if we want to say, well, okay, it's going to be horrible, but Bannon, he's going to get some stuff built. No, he's not. I mean, his infrastructure plan.
Well, you know what?
Let's
Connor,
tax credits.